Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've had a wonderful few hours, minutes, or even seconds since I last saw you. Today, I have for you a condensed version of solving your problems, given the tight turnaround, and, of course, my Game Week 22 team selection. One housekeeping thing before we start. I completely appreciate, and I have read your comments, that the quality of sound is not up to scratch, hence why I bought the mic stand to try and change it. But I did read one particularly intelligent comment I thought yesterday under the video that when I go on other channels, the mic isn't an issue, which means it's potentially a OBS issue on my end or something with my recording setup, which I will look into. Obviously, the turnarounds have been so tight, so if not by transfer plans, I will likely have it sorted for everything you need to know, or at least I will try it. And if any of you have any solutions and are particularly tech savvy with this type of stuff, then I would love to hear it as well, and I thank you for that in advance. I will have for you an update on Cole Palmer, benching dilemmas, and of course, where my captaincy falls. So without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into it. In last game week's team selection, I showed you my transfer plans all the way up until game week 26 and how that would look with my squad. And in the game week 24 version, it showed the sale of Robert Sanchez. So this is potentially the last week that I will own him this season, and it means that Sanchez supremacy comes to an end. Albeit, I might need to take the tagline away from him because when you compare it to what Sells did for me earlier in the season, it seems like a bit of a disservice that I'm doing towards Matt Sells. The one thing, though, is that he only takes a little bit of the cash away. And if for price rise reasons, I need a little bit more, then the obvious sale would be to sell Nicholas Jackson next week. And it makes a lot of sense to do that as well, because not only would I not have to deal with the Henderson blank in 29, which is the one I was looking to bring in, but there are quite a few attractive forward prospects, specifically Johan Wissa, and even Dominic Solanke, who I'm looking at the moment. The reason Wissa becomes so attractive is he facilitates in Bremer, and obviously I'll be doubling up on Brentford, but those guys just seem like they're going to score points for the entire season, so we will revisit that after this game week and see how the cards fall. But for now, at least, I'm going to stick with him, and who knows, maybe the last game week of the season for him in my team. But I think in an ideal world, I actually keep him and sell Jackson, and Jackson sort of gives me a reason to sell him, or someone else gives me a good enough reason to buy them, because he's still got good prospects, I think, from now until the end of the season. And he's not that far behind sales from Game Week 12 when I sold him. I imagine many of you are quite surprised, and many of you are in disagreement with my decision, and I think that is completely fair when I am benching arguably the best defensive asset in the game. However, for me, this is how it's going to go. So let me justify why. We'll start off with the easier call this week. The one person who is absolutely, definitely starting in this team is Oscar Guardiola. I think he's got the best fixture out of anyone in terms of being able to keep a clean sheet. Not in terms of Manchester City's defensive prospect, but I'm just looking at the opposition here. And that's me taking into account the quality of Amari Hutchinson and Tim Delap in particular. And I think Philogene might even be ready for the game as well. Who knows? He's also got such a high ceiling and so much attacking threat compared to most defenders that there's just no way I can bench him in this game. If I was willing to play him at Brentford away, I'm playing him in this game. And I'm quietly confident, albeit talking about it on a video, that he actually could return a haul this week. The other three, they all have their own bits and pieces that I don't like about them. But the second most secure place in the side is actually Robinson and not Hall. I think Leicester away is one of the better fixtures for a clean sheet, albeit I do not think it's easy. I tweeted on X that I thought for Everton's double, Leicester shouldn't just be taken for granted, and they certainly have enough attacking quality to score. They should have scored against Palace, obviously, poor finishing, but aside from that, in terms of chance creation and pressing, it was there, and it was good enough to score. But for the analysis that I did in the West Ham Fulham game, with the role that Robinson's, well, I'd say it's the first time he played this role against Fulham, right, when they were in a back four, but he's still operating in a wing-back-like position because Castagna forms a back three. I think the assist potential is so high. And obviously, the clean sheet prospects are still good relative to other fixtures. So then it comes down to Lewis Hall or Gabriel. I think both are going to concede. And I don't really want to start Lewis Hall. It's not a huge preference of mine, albeit I think I almost have to do it. He's shown so much going forward, and Newcastle have been so good at home, in such good form in general. Obviously, I have an appreciation for Bournemouth's attack. That's why I'm even considering this. I think he just gives me too much of a reason to bench him. And even if he doesn't clean, he's always got these attack and returns going on for him. So why am I benching Gabriel? Well, number one, and the most important thing, I just think Aston Villa score. Jacob Ramsey, Ollie Watkins, Morgan Rodgers, Yuri Tielemans, Kamara, Anana. That's good. That's really good, and it's really solid. Obviously, they've got Ramsey now back from injury, and I think they're going to cause sides problems. I think in transition, they can really hurt teams. And if they play Partey at the base again, I spoke about how Spurs exploited that a couple times in the first half. I think Villa will as well. We obviously remember the problems that Rodgers gave Partey in the return game in the second game week of the season. So I think Villa score. And they also have quite a big side. Watkins/Duran. I think Watkins will get the nod. Rodgers isn't a small guy. Jacob Ramsey's not that small either. Obviously, Anana, Kamara, Mings, Konsa. That's a decent aerial unit, I would say. And I don't think, therefore, it's a slam dunk that Gabriel scores a header or even gets a chance to score a header, like a really good chance. And the other thing is there's no Bukayo Saka. So yeah, from that left-hand side, he'll have those in-swinging Rice corners, which nearly produced him a goal against Spurs. But from the other side, I don't think Odegaard's delivery is anywhere close to as good as Saka's. So I think the threat's down. And the other thing is, if for whatever reason Mikel Merino plays, and he might, then his threat goes down from set pieces as well. And I've explained that there is quite literally an exponential relationship that when Merino plays, Gabriel's threat goes down significantly from set pieces. So for all of those reasons, and the fact that it's not the reason I'm doing it is to bet against the template, but it's nice, right? It's certainly favorable in my opinion. I'm going to bench him. I'm quite comfortable in doing so. You will notice that not only has Gabriel been relegated to the bench, but on this slide, he finds himself in the second bench position out of the outfield players. And that is not a mistake. Morgan Rogers will be starting ahead of him in the order and will be coming on for Cole Palmer should he miss out, and who we will touch on later. So why? Well, number one, as expressed, I think Aston Villa score, so I think that hugely takes away from Gabriel's floor and ceiling. But not only has Morgan Rogers been in good form, it's what I've seen in terms of his development that I really like. Earlier in the season, and I think it was simply an experience thing, when he would get into those more advanced zone, when he would get into positions whereby he could deliver some form of output, whether it's a goal or assist or a final pass or a shot, I think his temperament was a little bit different to what it is now. And it was simply due to a lack of experience. Sometimes it was rushed, sometimes he would make the wrong decision, sometimes he would snap at it a little bit, the shot. But now I think he's much calmer in those zones. And it's specifically the goal against Manchester City where I think that can really be seen. And as such, I'm very comfortable playing him on a very regular basis, knowing that when he's in the positions now, I can trust him to go and score. And I think that's quite a normal thing for a lot of breakthrough type of talents to experience. They have all the talent they need, but having not been in the situation many a time, they don't have many instances to draw back on to essentially say to themselves, okay, this is the best thing to do. But through that experience of maybe not delivering as well as he would have liked in the first quarter of the season, he's now developed that. And I think he's someone who you can trust to deliver you a certain level of output and not just these 5-6 pointers, but really go and get some of the bigger hauls as well. And as such, I'm going to be playing Morgan Rogers ahead of him. Moving on to the rest of the midfield, Gordon, there's not really much to talk about. I'm not going to sell him. I'm not going to bench him in this game. Obviously, wingers haven't traditionally been ideal against Bournemouth, but I'm just not benching him in the game. Who would I for, right? Potentially Rogers. I've obviously talked him up, and I did consider starting him. But when Cole Palmer might come off or might not play, and therefore I'll get Rogers off the bench, I'm happy just to keep him on the bench and then just play all of the other guys who I think are easier to choose, at least, and in my opinion, right. Phil Foden has the vice captaincy, and that is not by accident. I just fancy putting it on him as opposed to Alexander Isak. Midfield thing definitely kicks in there, but I do think City take Ipswich. And I didn't do a captaincy reveal like I normally did, because especially with Palmer's injury, there's just no way I'm going there. Especially when yesterday I said I'm going to captain Mohamed Salah. That's not like I'm dropping him either. So that will be the midfield. Moving on to Cole Palmer, he has a section in solving your problems, so we'll discuss him there. But the team looks interesting this week. I would say high-ish risk and high-ish reward, so it should be interesting to see how we pan out. But we've, of course, got the forwards to discuss. We will start with one of the big two talking points that this forward line boasts, and that is, firstly, the selection of João Pedro over Morgan Rogers. I think last night you saw that this United side, when they don't set up in a slightly deeper fashion and look to absorb pressure, are still susceptible defensively, just given the way they play and the players they have within that system and how everything interacts. And as such, especially when you consider João Pedro might be back at 10, if Welbeck is to get the nod and start at 9, even if Welbeck plays 60 minutes and I have João Pedro at 10 for 60 minutes, I'm more than happy to then have him at 9 for a bit as well, right? Getting the best of both worlds potentially, who knows? And then you combine that with the fundamentals, tonal occupants, the positions, the volume of actions, the quality of actions, penalties. For me, I have to start him this week. He's been very good to me when I've owned him overall, and I'm looking forward to starting him again. I just think the fixture's quite a bit better than Arsenal away, hence why he gets the nod over João Pedro. Obviously, I've spoken about a lot of positives for Villa. I still respect Arsenal. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if they win the game, but I'm a little bit higher on Villa than most this week. The second big talking point is the man who plays for this club, and that is Nicholas Jackson. He's not being sold, clearly, and it's mainly a strategy type of reason as to why I'm not selling him, right? In isolation, without Palmer, will he do better or worse? Well, the easy thing is to say that, okay, he's losing one of the best creatives in the world. Surely he must be worse. I have a slight theory that without Palmer, he'll feel like there's more responsibility on his shoulders and he might be a little bit more locked in for the game, and that could correspond to more returns. And I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But with that variable and with the fact that having 4 frees next week opens up a world of possibilities for my significantly advantageous over having 3, and the fact that I don't really want to buy Chris Wood this week, like I don't mind, it's not a bad transfer by any means, right? Southampton at home, he's in the form of his life. But I potentially may need to go to Johan Wissa for squad structure reasons, and I want to give myself the opportunity to have my choice, right, without it being forced this. So he'll be staying, and then Isak, I mean, I really am expecting it to become 9-9 in terms of his goal scoring streak. And as such, if you're captaining him, I think there's a high floor associated with him there. So good luck with that. And now let's move on to solving your problems. I would say this is one of the easier situations you will face when your premium asset gets injured. In my eyes, you start him and go from there. We all have very healthy squad depth. At least most of us have very healthy squad depth, resultant of not owning Erling Haaland and the number of very, very good cheap facilitators within FPL currently. As such, you can just pretty much trust your 8th attacker, whether that be Amad Diallo, who just scored a hat-trick, and in this case, you can't classify him as an 8th, I would say, after the hat-trick in your particular team for this week. Rodgers, João Pedro, Semenyo. There's just a lot of good cheap facilitators, right? So I would happily start him, and if he doesn't play, he doesn't play, no problem. Just let the 8th attacker come on. What I would say, though, is start him, because the game's on Monday, so at least he's got some time. Sure, it's looking unlikely that he starts, but if he does and he hauls, you really don't want to be the guy who just has him on his bench for no real reason, because he's not going to be on the bench and come on and make a substitute appearance. At least it's very unlikely. Whereas if he does start, he probably racks up 70, 75 minutes and then comes off. Which moves me on to my second point. I already said that I thought Mohamed Salah was the best captain. And when you have a reduced expected minutes Palmer, I really would potentially be moving off. I think it's such an unnecessary risk to take and move into a Mohamed Salah. And you know he's not going to be at 100%. There's no way he'll be at 100% for the game if he's not training a few days beforehand. So I think it's very simple with Cole Palmer. I would start him and I wouldn't captain him, and I would just trust your 8th attacker to come off the bench and almost expect him to do so. There are a few injuries, so we will deal with it on this slide and the next slide to an extent. What should you do with Ismail Assar, who has a slight hamstring issue? Now, the extent of the hamstring issue, we don't know. However, I don't love the West Ham away fixture, and I did speak about how these fixtures are open to interpretation. I like Brentford at home, but after that, United can be... Well, it's interesting. See, I think for Brighton, they'll be okay, but I think for Palace, it might be a little bit harder. And as such, I'm more open to the sell. If you can afford someone like, let's say, Brian Mbeumo, right? And you're just going to hold him for the long term, I think going there is fine. Anthony Gordon, I think going there is fine. If you're really interested in Aman now and he frees up a bit of cash, okay. I don't love that move as much, but I'm still open to it. So I don't mind selling Sarr, but if you are in the position to bench him, similarly, that's fine. You don't have to play at 3 at the back, by the way. That's one thing. You could bench Sarr probably and play a 4 at the back. And playing a 4 at the back is absolutely fine. It's only 1 week. It's just one position. It's not the end of the world, right? And you wouldn't have an asset as well if you thought they were that bad. So even if the fixture's not super ideal, I think benching him for 1 week and then reassessing when you get some more information is absolutely fine. Moving on to Cunha and Diaz. I know Cunha has an illness. Personally, I think he's just too important and start. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, I don't know much about the illness, but if it was an injury, slightly different. But with an illness, I think he'll be there. And then Luis Diaz has a sore throat as well. And Jota's out. I think Jota will be out of the game on Saturday. So Gakpo almost definitely starts. And if Diaz is a bit ill, especially with the period coming up, it makes sense to give him a bit of a rest at least. Then maybe it'll be Nunes Gakpo. And I don't think against Brentford's like a game where there'll be more transitions, it's that bad of a weapon, and he's well rested following his suspension. Moving on to what is really the number one staple piece in solving your problems, benching dilemmas. Now, I, of course, cannot account for every single combination. For example, João Pedro versus Enzo, João Pedro versus Munoz versus Ahmad, and then Rodgers versus all of those. So I will give you my general outlook on the guys, and then you can apply that to your team. João Pedro versus Rodgers, I have to say João Pedro because I'm starting him, and it's for the reasons that I discussed prior. But given that I was encouraging about Rodgers' prospects, I would also be happy to start him alongside João Pedro. Now, similarly, earlier, I benched Gabriel. So I wouldn't mind if you did the same as well. And I think it's absolutely fine. I think benching Timber as well, who's got less attacking threat than Gabriel, especially with Saka out the side. And even benching Raya for Fabianski, I don't think is the worst move in the world. Albeit he's got a decent ceiling because I expect Villa to face some shots. But mainly, I'm quite comfortable benching Gabriel, albeit I imagine there will be some disagreement. Enzo, I doubt he comes off the bench, and I think it's a pretty decent fixture for him. So if you want to start him, go ahead. And if he doesn't, someone else will likely come on for him. Munoz is close, and I would say this is potentially my toughest decision on here. I'm 60-40 in favor of benching. I just think going away to West Ham at the moment, with what Potter's shown so far, will make it a little bit difficult for Palace to keep a clean sheet. And I also think that the defence will see a decline through the absence of Trevor Chalobah, who has obviously moved back to Chelsea for the rest of the season, and then we'll see what goes on from there. He's got good attacking threat, but I just don't think they're going to keep a clean sheet. So I would bench him in the cases where your team is particularly strong, your defense is particularly strong. But like I said, it's 60-40. So where your team isn't that strong, and like let's say it's him versus Gabriel, honestly, I'm fine to start him over Gabriel. It was more just a case of if you have like Robinson and Castagna a double up, and then also someone like Trent, right? Because I think Trent's, even though I expect Brentford to score, it's still Trent, right? I'm not sure I feel so comfortable ever benching him. Ahmad, he just scored a hat-trick and is Brighton at home. No way in any universe that I'm benching him. Robinson, I would start in pretty much all cases. And then moving on to Semenyo versus Hall. As I expressed, I'm not overly keen on playing Hall this week. I have Semenyo higher than him in my ranking, so I would happily play Semenyo in pretty much every case. And then when it comes to Hall, like I said, I think you almost have to start him because of how good he's been. But I really would not be surprised if Bournemouth score. So if you're really adamant that West Ham don't score and you want to take this move of starting Munoz over Hall, I don't mind it. I don't think it's the worst play in the world at all. But yeah, I personally just expect Bournemouth to get a goal. I thought it would be beneficial for some of you to hear what my transfer plans are now for Game Week 23. Potentially because you might take some inspiration from them and they could help you with your moves. So even if he hauls against Ipswich, and it'll make it a much tougher sell, and one I will do somewhat reluctantly, I think I'll have to sell Phil Foden. Even if Guardiola scores 30 points against Ipswich, I think I'm quite happy to sell him regardless, because against Chelsea, and then like Newcastle, Arsenal, maybe Villa in there as well, I don't see them keeping many clean sheets, and he's a huge cash cow, as is Phil Foden. That's the main reason why he's being sold. Now, why are they being sold? To facilitate the Liverpool asset. I would very much like my triple Liverpool from Game Week 23 in preparation for Double Game Week 24, but also the Ipswich home fixture, with all due respect. Trent will almost definitely be coming in, and the current plan is to sell Robinson and ensure that Van Dijk partners him, and then Lewis Hall and Gabriel will just function in a rotation. I can't afford that when I just make those three moves. Depending on price rises, I could be anywhere from 0.2 to 0.4 out, which would mean Nicholas Jackson has to go. I can afford the move to Dominic Solanke, right? If it's only 0.2, I could go Sanchez to Henderson, but it's looking like I'll have to sell Jackson, even if I'm 0.1 off, which means I can go Jackson to Solanke, and then I'll be fine. By the way, this is with Foden to Eze. I could also go Jackson to Wood. Or, instead of going Foden to Eze, I could go to Brian Mbeumo, and I really like this. This is my preferred move. I would rather have Solanke and Mbeumo together, but I can't afford that unless I drop Van Dijk to Konate or Trent to Konate, which is potentially a solution if I'm really adamant that I would like Mbeumo and Solanke. But with Solanke, Leicester at home, and then the potential double in 25, just a potential one. The fact that I get immediate upside and I set myself up to at least be there for the opportunity, right? And not have to massively restructure then as a result to get Spurs players in, I think could be potentially beneficial. If not, though, if I do choose to go Brian Mbeumo and I decide that he's worth it over Johan Wissa, I will literally just go and get, well, if I think he's worth it over Ebery at Chiese, I will literally just go and get Johan Wissa, double up on the Brentford attack. And I feel comfortable with them because they score against pretty much everyone. So that's my current plan, and I'm looking forward to see how that develops. There's a lot of upside, I think, to that move, and quite a bit of security as well. And that is all she wrote for this game week's content, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much for the likes you've been dropping on the video. They have consistently been surpassing 300, so let's try and do that again for this one. Additionally, if you have not subscribed, whether you're a new or regular viewer around here, consider doing so as we push for 7,000. And who knows, maybe you'll cash in on some of the luck that many of us have been having on this channel. I wish you the best of luck for this game week. I hope your arrows are all green, and I shall see you on the other side. Goodbye.